guys, welcome back to Bible Time with Mrs. Barr. Today we're going to try something new. This is the first time that I've recorded on Zoom, so we will see how this goes. But I wanted to be able to give you guys an opportunity to follow along and read with me as we're going through the video. So we are looking at Acts chapter 18, starting at verse 18 to the end of the chapter. This section is titled Priscilla, Aquila, and Apollos. Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Then he left the brothers and sisters and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Before he sailed, he had his hair cut off at Caesarea because of a vow he had taken. Then he arrived at Ephesus, where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila. He himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they asked him to spend more time with them, he declined. But as he left, he promised, "I will come back if it is God's will." Then he set sail from Ephesus. When he landed at Caesarea, he went up to Jerusalem and greeted the church, and then went down to Antioch. After spending some time in Antioch, Paul set out from there and traveled from place to place throughout the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately. Though he knew only the baptism of John, he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more accurately. When Apollos wanted to go to Archelaia, the brothers and sisters encouraged him and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. When he arrived, he was a great help to those who, by grace, had believed. For he vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate, proved from the scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. Okay, so kind of have a lot going on in this section. Paul stayed in Corinth for a while, then he left and sailed to Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila, the tent makers. And this is interesting. Before he left, he had his hair cut. And it says where he had his hair cut because he had taken a vow. So I guess, to remember that he had taken a vow, to hold himself accountable to what he was going to do. I don't know. That's interesting. They arrived in Ephesus, where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila, left them to share the gospel there, and he went on. He himself went to the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. They encouraged him to spend more time there, but he declined and said he would come back if the Lord would allow it. When he landed in Caesarea, he went up to Jerusalem and greeted the church, and then went down to Antioch. It's amazing, he's doing all this traveling before forms of transportation were really around. After spending time in Antioch, Paul set out from there and traveled from place to place throughout the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. And then there's this Apollos guy that comes up, and he's a native from Alexandria, and he came to Ephesus. He knew the scriptures, he had knowledge of them, so he was sharing about the Lord to others. He was excited about it. He wanted people to know, but all he really knew and understand was John's baptism. So when Priscilla and Aquila had heard about him, they invited him into his home and taught him more and told him about Jesus and explained more things to them, so that when he was sharing with people about God, he could explain it more accurately. And then he wanted to go. Apollos wanted to move on, and the brothers encouraged him and sent letters with him to encourage the other disciples to open up their arms to him. And he was a great help to them. And then we end with, he fervently refuted his Jewish opponents in public debates, proving that the scripture that Jesus was the Messiah. So ending on a good note, you have all these people that are willing to go out and do these things, and are being bold for the Lord. And so it's great to see. So that is the end of Acts chapter 18. We started at verse 18, and we'll see you later. Bye. God bless.